All right, I think we can get started.
Okay,
Vera, do you want to kick us off?
I sure will. Well, that said, good afternoon, everyone. I would say late afternoon. We thank you for joining us for our session on the ins and outs of fundraising. Some of you may be excited about today's topic and actually enjoy fundraising like we do, but there may be some of you on the call with us today that feel a little uncomfortable. I want to say both groups are welcome here today. And so what I want you to do is just take a breath and put yourself at ease. We're going to take you on this journey with us. We're here for you. And so we're really delighted to have you with us today. So at this time, I'd like the team to introduce themselves, and I'll start with myself. My name is Vera Lewis. I am the Development and Partnerships Vice President at DBSA. And I'll turn it to you, Kimberly.
Thank you, Vera. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kimberly King, and I'm the Senior Manager of Mental Health Equity and External Partnerships for the National Office of DBSA located in Chicago.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Shavinko, and I am the Annual Fund Coordinator.
Perfect, thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit now about the objectives for today's session. What you can expect. And we wanted to keep it pretty simple and manageable. So we have 4 key priorities that we're going to cover today. We will share some ways for you to start the process of relationship building, tools to develop an elevator pitch, which is very important. And we're going to be discussing the importance of storytelling as a strategy. And Kimberly will go into greater detail in her part of the presentation. We're also going to be talking about individual giving, peer-to-peer giving, and corporate giving, sponsorships, and grants. But before we begin the presentation, I want to encourage you to ask questions in the chat. All questions are welcome, so don't think like, oh, that's, that might not sound smart. Don't worry about that at all. We want you to feel free to ask questions that may feel uncomfortable for you as well. We will do our best to address all the questions during this session. However, if we do run out of time, we will still provide answers to your questions. And towards the end of the summit, there will be all of that information will be provided to you. I will now turn it over to Jessica, who's going to share some information about an interactive app we'll be using today. Jessica.
Thank you, Vera. If you know how to use a QR code, you can do so on the screen right now. Otherwise, if you want to go to your browser on your phone or on your computer, you can type in slido.com. It's written on the screen, but it's slido.com. I'll give you a second to do that. And then after you go to the browser, this is what your browser page should look like. Up at the top, there is a joining as a participant and enter code here section. If you want to just enter fundraising, it's at the top of the slide into that box and then hit enter. You should, even with the QR code and with this, you should be brought up to a page. And we're going to use that tool right now. So I'll give you another second to kind of get that set up. All right, so the first question we wanted to ask you and kind of gauge your experience, interest, how you feel about fundraising is, what are your feelings about asking for money? And you can go ahead and type in as many different answers as you want, short answer, 1 word, a few words, and it will populate up here on the screen. And this is, we put it in a word cloud format. So the more time someone says a word or a phrase, it will actually appear bigger. So if everyone is having kind of the same feelings, like it looks like nervous is on there, a number of people put nervous. So that's like a common theme among everyone. I'm also seeing skeptical, unsure. All they can do is say no, which is a really good piece of advice. Depends on the cause or purpose.
Mhm.
Self-sabotage. But again, the big one is nervous. All right, if you can just start wrapping this up, put in your last words. Again, how everyone is feeling is very warranted. But we hope after this presentation that you're not going to feel the same way, and we can really help you with that. So to start off, I'm going to bring it back to Vera to address some myths and truths about fundraising.
Perfect. So once again, want to say thank you so much for your honesty and being authentic. This helps us as we go through the presentation, and it's okay to be nervous. We've all been there. So the more you do it, the easier it becomes. But with that said, I'm sure you've heard countless do's and don'ts of fundraising, and perhaps some of you may even believe some of these myths that have been out there. They're very common fundraising myths and truths that are on the slide right now. So we're going to go through 3 myths and the truth that is related to them. So the first one, people will simply give because it is the right thing to do. Some will, but the actual truth is that when it comes to a grant or giving money, funders are really looking for a return on investment, the ROI that you probably have heard of constantly. They consider this to be an investment. And there are usually a lot of stakeholders that may have influence on whether you receive money as well. And so with that said, I want you to take some time to define what type of ROI you provide. I just want you to think about it. You don't have to do it right now, but it's very important that if you want someone to support you, that you take the time to see what assets do I have? What would a funder or a corporate sponsor be interested in? So when you create that list, I want you to list it based on them looking at it from their perspective. What do you think would resonate with them? To write a check for you. So that's just a little homework for later on. And it's also very important that you do that more than once.Maybe it's every year, maybe it's quarterly, because sometimes you have new things that have presented themselves within your organization or your chapter that is a new asset that might be very, very important to a funder to give you money. So number 2, I think we've all just shared that it is scary and you are begging for money from someone. And that is a myth that you should really think about. You are actually offering people the opportunity to support your mission. And your mission is very, very important. It can be a little overwhelming when you think about the fact there's over 1.5 million not-for-profits just in the USA. So the struggle to stand out is uncomfortable for many of us and a lot of organizations. So make your story resonate. No matter what your mission statement is, a well-crafted story can really help people relate to your work, your core values, and the people that you serve. There's a presentation that was done by the marketing team about storytelling. So definitely take the opportunity to look for that at the end of the summit and read that. And also Kimberly's going to give you some amazing tips during this presentation. The other myth is as soon as you ask, you're going to get the money. Fundraising is a process that takes time. It is not unusual for it to take 6 to 8 weeks, if not more. Sometimes it can take several months. So keep that in mind when you're applying for grants. Whether you've submitted electronically, some people, they request that it's mailed, to really think about when that money can potentially come in. Will it be coming in time? But I want to stress, and Jessica will mention this as well in a part of her presentation, do not let this be your only revenue source because there are no guarantees. This money, if you are to receive a yes, is like cherry on the top of ice cream. Really, it is gravy. It's like a gift. So make sure you diversify your revenue strategy, and that this is simply one of them. So Jessica will now speak to you about the fundraising life cycle.
Thank you, Vera. And just going off with what Vera said, there's so many different revenue streams of money coming in, talking to different funders. But I think one thing that stays constant is how you treat the people that are giving you money. And what's key to that is the fundraising life cycle. So there are 5 components that make it up. It's identification, qualification, cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. And if you notice on there, it's a continuous loop, because you should constantly be working on your relationship with donors, especially the cultivation and stewardship aspects of there. To start with identification, this is who are you going to ask to give? Looking at it from an individual standpoint, a great place to start would be with your current donors. Maybe it's looking in your database and seeing who's not given in the last year or 2, and going after these people as warm leads, because they already identified with your mission, because they donated in the past, and you already kind of have some information on them. So you could start that off with messaging when you might go to them with like an email appeal. For finding new donors, there's numerous amounts of ways you can do this. Some of them could be attracting new donors through social media, tabling at events, or finding them through your newsletter. And Kimberly's going to talk more about that in a little bit, but it's really, I would suggest going through your communication channels and identifying anyone you touch as potential new donors. The next one is qualification, and this really goes hand in hand with identification. Sometimes some fundraising life cycles put that in like the same one, but this is where you really do some research to see the donor's capacity to give. So if you're looking at old donors or new ones, there's a bunch of different like wealth screening tools out there to use. They cost money. Otherwise, I like to use like LinkedIn and Google for free. You can look up like what the donor's job is, what their spouse's job is, how much money their house costs, to kind of gauge how much their capacity to give. And it's super important to do something like this, because you want to go to them with a number that you don't want to lowball them, because then you won't get as much money. And they could also get offended, being like, oh, you don't think I have that much money. And you want to make sure you're getting the most out of all the work you put in. And so lastly, with this, when you make these lists of prospects, you want it to be, and like potential money you can get from them, you want it to be a lot longer than the list of funding dollars you need, because everyone is not going to donate to you, and that's okay. You should factor that in. And then the third tier on that is cultivation, which is super important. And it's building relationships, engaging with the prospect, and preparing to make the ask. So when you do this, you should really ask yourself how your potential donors' wants align with DBSA's needs. And after you figure that out, then you need to start educating the potential donor. And again, Kimberly's going to go more into depth about the elevator pitch and relationship building on the next few slides. But building a relationship with the donor is really important to finding their passion and eventually using that to make the ask. Some techniques that we've used for cultivation in the past here at DBSA headquarters includes forwarding DBSA media like podcasts or newsletters to donor that we think they'd be interested in, having major donor little webinar events, like showing the annual report of everything, recap of everything we did in the year, and also having one-on-one meetings with some major donors. And like Vera mentioned, one important thing to note is that you can't just assume that because someone's your friend or you think it's a good cause that they're going to donate. You really need to show them that the cause that you're talking about is a good investment. And that is really something that you do through cultivation. And then we move into, which is sometimes the hardest part, the ask. But if you have done your qualification and cultivation and research, you should have a good idea of how much you're asking for and what program you're going to ask them to fund. So really, if you feel like you did enough research on the background, it makes it less scary. For example, one time during the cultivation stage with a donor, they mentioned that they were really interested in youth mental health. So when we made the ask, we discussed our new teen and parent and caregiver support groups that need funding. So we made sure to include that their impact was essential to the success of this program to really get them to make that gift. And then after you make the ask, there is a number of responses that you can get. So you can get yes, maybe, soft no, hard no, no. Obviously, the best case scenario is yes. And the first thing you need to do when they say that is thank them immediately and then find out how they would like to make their gift. And if you get anything else besides a yes, that is not the end of the world. And it's actually just an opportunity. It might just be that you ask them at the wrong time. It might not be the right person making the ask, or it might not be the right amount. And then this goes back to why identification and qualification are so important so that you can really find the best for those three key things. And then finally, we have stewardship. So this is after they make the gift. You want to say thank you as quickly as possible. You can do this by phone call, email, handwritten letter, or all of the above. We always like to have, especially with a significant gift, our CEO make a phone call or an email just to get that extra touch point. But one important thing is when you're sending these, make sure that you recognize the donor's name, correct name and amount on there, because that will do a lot to tarnish the relationship. And then after you do the initial thank you, you have to keep on thanking them as the year goes on. One thing that we do is on our normal homepage, we have a partners in wellness page where we list off some of our major donors and put them at different levels and like highlight them on our page where you could go see them whenever you want. DBSA, and so does a lot of different organizations. They highlight all of their donors in their annual report. So continuing to do that. And then you have to also go full circle again into your cultivation tactics. So you have to continue sharing things that DBSA is doing, bringing up information that goes with what they don't, maybe if they donated to a specific program in the past. Something really helpful that a lot of people do is make notes. And if you have like a customer management system, you can make notes in the CRM and just be like, this is what they liked this program, like little notes about them. So when you talk to them next, it really is welcoming, friendly, you remember them. And so the goal of it all is to retain donors. So the more you cultivate, the more you stewardship, they're going to keep coming back to give, and retaining a donor and having them come back next year is proven, and research shows that it's actually cheaper than bringing on a brand new donor. So there's like financial motivations to do this as well. Yes, so I'm gonna then pass it over to Kimberly.
Thanks, Jessica. Hello, everybody again. I'm here to talk to you today about some things you want to do and think about before you make your first ask. So we're going to be talking about today relationship building, elevator pitch, and storytelling. Next slide. Now, some of you might be wondering, what do my personal relationships have to do with fundraising? Well, a lot actually. Relationships are key elements to the cultivation process, as Jessica mentioned earlier. Because as our wise owl on our screen here tells us, it's not just about what you do, it's who you know, corny pun intended. So people that you know can serve as a valuable resource for fundraising efforts because they may be able to connect you to a grant maker or influencers who can champion your cause. These people can include your family and friends, members of your existing social groups, like your chapter board members, members of your support group, people that you know from church, school, yoga class, etc. They also include your coworkers, your work colleagues. I know sometimes it's real tempting to want to keep your personal life and your professional life very separate, but I can tell you from my own personal experience that some of my best leads have come from what's referred to as water cooler talk. And such discussions can also be another unique way for you to strengthen a bond with your coworkers. So don't be afraid to open up a little and share. So what do you do if the people in your immediate circle aren't as passionate about you, about your cause, or can't provide you in the leads? Well, what you're going to want to do next is to look at ways that you can expand your personal network. There are a number of ways you can do this. The first being that you can volunteer with local organizations in your community that serves the constituents you want to reach. This can be anything from your local food pantry, it could be the YMCA, wherever there's a gathering of individuals in the community, the way you can connect with people one-on-one or in small groups. You also may want to attend community and networking events for the very same reason. When you do the volunteering part, it actually shows others that you are committed to helping and giving to others. In terms of attending community and networking events, that's usually more personally motivated, but it's still a great source, a way to expand your network. Another way to expand your network that doesn't require leaving your house, although with pandemic restrictions lifting, you might want to explore some of the other two options that I talked about earlier, but you want to take chances to utilize social media for good. So yes, I know there's a lot of social issues that are exasperated by the use of social media. However, social media can also serve as a helpful tool to making connections with other like-minded individuals, as well as grant makers and other potential partners. Some of the ways you can use social media to help you build your network include sharing your story and testimonials from people who have helped with who've been helped by your organization. You can also use social media to promote upcoming events, or if the event already happened, you can share post-event updates. And as well as you also can use social media to follow companies and individual influencers who focus on mental health or your cause. So next slide. So after you've done what I refer to as your relationship inventory, you're going to want to, and have begun to explore ways to expand your network. You want to think about what's next. So here we are. Allow me to introduce myself, AKA developing your elevator speech. So what is an elevator speech or pitch? An elevator speech is a brief verbal narrative, think about 30 seconds, maybe no more than a minute, that allows you to introduce yourself and get across one or two key points related to your cause, and allows you to make a personal connection to the individual you're trying to reach. It's called an elevator pitch because it should take the same amount of time to get your pitch out as it takes to ride in the elevator with someone. When you're thinking about your elevator pitch, there's some key questions you want to address. It's who you are, what you do, what is the ask, and how can I follow up? Next slide. So beyond addressing those questions, some of the ways you want to get ready to deliver your pitch requires practice, and more practice, because you want to be prepared. So being prepared can include making your pitch in the mirror, on video, record yourself on your phone. You could talk to other members of your chapter or your support group, and just keep practicing, taking time to rehearse your message. You also want to be authentic. Make it personal. Discuss why a specific program has excited you, or you're excited about a specific program. You don't want to put on airs or try to mimic someone else, unless that's something that's really innate to your personality. You really want, I always say, being authentic is the best way to get your message across, because nobody is as good as being you than yourself. You also want to add stories, like your own connection to the mission. It could be your personal story about living with a mood disorder, or being a caregiver of someone with a mood disorder, but also could be someone else's story, or like such that we share through DBSA communication channels. Some of those communication includes social media, which includes our Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter accounts. It also could be in our monthly and quarterly newsletters, the synapse and making mental health matter. And you also can do things like listen to DBSA podcasts like I'm Living Proof 2.0, Letters to My Younger Self, which features personal testimony from people who live with mood disorders. You can find DBSA podcasts on Spotify and other audio streaming services that you utilize. You also want to make sure that you're being relevant. you only have a few seconds and one time to make a first impression. So how do you get their attention? Why should this person care about your mission or DBSA's mission? What in the world is going on? What in the world is going on that relates to the cause and the consequences for not supporting? So commonly in the last few years, we talk about the impact of the pandemic, but it could also be other things like social justice issues, criminal justice, etc. You also want to make this elevator pitch conversational. Nobody likes to be talked at. You want to treat the person that you're talking to like a potential partner. If you think they would benefit from a DBSA program or resources, I think Jessica mentioned this earlier, you can also share that information with them. If you don't know all the details, don't panic. You can always use this as an opportunity to follow up and provide them with additional information. And last but not least, you want to find a way to provide that person with a way to follow up with you, or for you to follow up with them. That indicates, you should only do this though if a person indicates they want to learn more. You don't want to be the nagging pest, but when a person indicates they want to know more, they'll be interested in following up. Make sure you provide them with that information, your contact information, email address, your website, etc. And next slide. So, and last on this topic I want to cover with you before I turn it back over to Jessica is about storytelling. For nonprofits, storytelling can help your organization connect with donors and prospective supporters. It also can help you make your brand, the name of your organization, more memorable. It can also create an emotional impact, which can be used to boost your calls to action for the person whom you're communicating with. Next slide. Now, how you share your story largely depends on the method you use to deliver your message. Some of the ways you can deliver your message include email outreach, like in personal individual appeals, social media. You can also utilize your website. You can use your newsletter. If you don't have one, you might consider creating one so you can share updates with people before you even make your ads so they can know a little bit about your organization and what you're doing. That newsletter can be electronic or in print. And you also can use direct mail, the good old fashioned way, direct mail, AKA snail mail. It still works, and you still have quite a bit of the population that still looks forward to opening mail. So don't forget to use that as a resource. Now, next slide. Some of the best practices for storytelling are things that you learned back in elementary school about creating a story. And it's about choosing your main character. You want to build your story around one main character or point. It could be the peer perspective or a caregiver perspective, or whatever you think would be most relevant to the person you're trying to connect with or your audience you're trying to connect with. You want to make sure your story has a beginning, middle, and end. You want to describe, you want to really work to create a scene with a person where they can follow the journey that you're speaking on, and there's some change and emotion. And lastly, a call to action and impact. And you can use images to support your words or connect concrete data to your story. Again, that largely depends on the delivery method that you use. Sometimes this will be storytelling will be verbal, but other times it will be in other forms. So you can think about ways you can use data to improve or support your story. And that can include anything from using DBSA's website as a resource or other trusted sources like SAMHSA and other government websites. Before we move to the next section, I just want to check to see if we had any questions in the chat room. And people are asking, will the slides be accessible for future use? Yes, we will be sharing the slides at the end of the summit. It may not be today, but by the end of the week, you will have a copy of all the presentations which you registered for. And so I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to turn it back over to Jessica, who's going to talk to you more about individual giving and peer-to-peer fundraising.
Thanks, Kimberly. And for the next part of the presentation, we are going to highlight some of DBSA's different revenue streams. I'm going to start with individual giving, which is what I work with at DBSA. And just by definition, individual giving is an individual person giving a charity a gift of money. And it's super important because across the board of all nonprofits, individual giving accounts for more than 70% of all money raised by nonprofits. And at DBSA, we break up our individual giving into two main things. There's major giving, which we classify as any gift that's over $3,500. But you can define it however you see fit. I've worked at an organization that has defined it as $10,000. If your organization, if a big gift for you is $500, then consider that a major gift. And then annual fund is anyone else that's less than that. And the main reason we just differentiate it is because major donors, we want to treat, we want to steward them a little bit more, cultivate them a little more because they're giving at that higher amount. And then on the right side, I listed off all of the different ways to give. This is not even an exhaustive list. There's so many ways to give. If you do not have an online donation page yet, I would really highly suggest getting one. We use Every Action. We also have a payment processor Stripe through that. So, and you usually have to pay fees for that. Unless you're doing it on Facebook, you're not really going to get away from fees, but please follow up with us after this webinar if you don't have one, because we'll help you get that one because that's really essential. And also any of the other gives, if you want to learn more about them, you can email us. It's just we do not have time during this presentation to go through all of them. I want to point out the recurring giving. That's usually like a monthly gift that someone will have their credit card on file and it will be automatically be charged. It's really, we've made a push for it this year more than recently. It's really great because you're getting in money every month without even having to try. So if you can put some strategy behind that too this year, highly suggest. And then, so if we didn't know, we feel like everyone is on a different spectrum of fundraising on this webinar. So if you're starting off at square one, I wanted to urge you to create a budget or fundraising prediction for the year and break it down by month so it seems a little bit more attainable. At DBSA here, we do that. We send out monthly appeals, and we usually do two to three emails a month. And then over the whole year, we're doing like 3 in snail mail, 3 big mailer house snail mails. We might send out another 1 or 2. But over here, before even 2022 started, we sat down with our comms team in 2021 and really mapped out what we wanted to talk about for the whole year. So we looked at national observances, what the comms team was going to be producing so that when they were giving out toolkits and resources, our appeals were in line with them. And if you don't have, and that's a lot, and I understand that some like chapters and work groups might not be able to have the capacity to do that. So if you were going to if you only could focus on like 2 months, I would suggest November and December, because November at the end of that is Giving Tuesday, which is an international day of giving. And even though it is super crowded and everyone asking for gifts, it does get a lot of donations on that day. So you really should be sending out an email at least on that Tuesday. And then the most popular giving season is like December too. Like the last 3 days account for, I think, like 30% of donations across the board. So sending out like a fundraising email on those last few days of the year, because people are trying to get their gifts in so they could write that off on taxes. And then under that, monthly matches, campaign goals and matching gifts are all components that you can mention within your appeals to kind of get people motivated to give. If you set a fundraising goal publicly, say that for Giving Tuesday, you wanted to raise like $60,000 and really shared that with your network, had a thermometer so they could go with you while you're measuring your success, it really motivates the donor and they feel like they're more a part of it. To have a match is a board member or a corporate partner or really anyone pledge to give a certain amount of money if you raise that amount of money. So if like a corporate partner or like a board member pledge $5,000, your messaging would be like, if you donate $10, you would matched 1-for-1. So your gift will really go twice as far and be like $20. That makes donors super motivated to give as well. They think their gift is going farther, which it is. And especially especially if we're about to enter a time of recession, they might be making a smaller gift, feel bad about that. But if we have the match, they won't. And they also love when there's a time limit on it. Usually matches, they run out of time. So it'll be like for a month or 2 weeks, it'll be like, we have this match until like December 31st. Make sure you do it before the time is out. So that also does that. And a lot of this stuff is promoted on social media and email campaign, in the mail too, if you have the match that goes on for a little long time. And I really encourage you to share your success, like if you hit your goal with your network as well. And don't feel like you have to do a match or have a goal every month in your campaigns if you're doing monthly campaigns, because it's a little bit more special if you just do it for a select few campaigns. And then just some other really quick tips about individual giving is we really want to make it as easy as possible for the donor to give. So giving them multiple options like I listed out before and making them feel really comfortable with their decision is going to lead to less friction and get the gift faster. Or you can even, one suggestion is you can even include a donation link in your email signature when you're having these communications, and just even if you're like doing a special campaign during a month, include it in your email signature. And so that it's right there for someone that's looking for it. Employee matching gifts is, it's great and not great at the same time, because if a donor makes a gift, it puts the ball in their court to reach out to their HR department to see if they have a matching gift program, and then to start the paperwork. HR might reach out to your organization, or if you kind of already have a relationship with whatever platform they go through, they might not. But that gift can take anywhere from 2 to like 9 months to get here. So we really can't, you really can't rely on it for your monthly budget, but it is, I like to say, like free money. And some corporations, depending on how big they are, will match it 1-for-1, 1-for-2, or 1-for-3. And then lastly, I already kind of touched on this with talking about your major donors differently, but live bunts, side bunts, and laps, those are philanthropy lingo for last year, but not this year, some years, but not this year, and lapsed. So these people just haven't donated to you this year, maybe in a few years, and you want to be able to get them back. You want to retain them. You want to get them back into your network. So you can talk to them very differently. Talk to them about a campaign maybe they donated to in the past, said, you donated last year at this time. Would you like to donate again? We miss you in our community. So really trying to get back those people that are already in your network because again, like I mentioned, I think at the beginning, is that they already have identified with your mission in the past. So it should be a little bit easier to get them. The next revenue stream is peer-to-peer giving. So this definition, and a lot of people sometimes get kind of confused what exactly this is. It's when peer giving, when an individual organizes personal campaigns to collect donations from their peers, so their friends or family. Sorry. The people that will be doing peer-to-peer campaigns are usually really strong supporters of your organization, what you're doing. They could be close friends or family members involved with the organization, or have a really emotional connection to your mission. And I think it's kind of easier to explain this with some examples of what peer-to-peer giving is. So I have them listed out on the side too, but like friendly competitions can be a number of things. In March, I organized at our office a March Madness bracket that had a buy-in, and then there was like a split the pot. The winner get half, and the other half goes to DBSA. Some companies have multiple branches in different states or different locations, and people love friendly competition. So pinning those branches against each other to see who can raise the most money often works. At a previous organization, there was a corporation that would do a casual Friday if you donated to the organization, so they could wear jeans on Friday if they made a small donation to the organization. Those are great in like office settings too. As for endurance programs here in Chicago, we just actually had the Chicago Marathon, which is a huge peer-to-peer campaign. And together they have runners that pick a charity to run for and raise money. So you don't have to be directly involved in the Chicago Marathon, but any race, a runner can pledge to run for you and ask people to donate money. There are like even pledge events where someone pledges $1 for every amount of mile they run or walk, and then they have to pay that out for a total. Another organization I work with, they have this thing called the 100-mile challenge, where you have like all summer to run 100 miles, and you post on social media your progress and ask people to donate. So it gets a lot of people involved. Social media is often used in these to bring awareness to what you're doing and get people excited. And finally, for like local establishments, many of our DBSA chapter support groups have a really great advantage because they're on the grassroots level. You're really involved in your community. So like play that up and go to your local businesses to do a fundraiser. Ask your local gym to do proceeds from like a yoga class, or a local coffee shop to donate a portion of proceeds from a coffee like latte to go back to your organization. Although this isn't I think it's kind of worth mentioning, you could also ask your local restaurants or grocery stores to donate snacks for your meetings. And usually, depending on who is the fundraiser, these are great because they are not really heavy lifts on your part. You want to make sure you're clear about your involvement with the person offering to do a fundraiser before, so that a lot does not get put on you. Is there any questions about individual or peer-to-peer? Okay, then I will move on to Kimberly.
Thank you, Jessica. So in our time remaining, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to talk to you about the area which I deal with on a regular basis in my role at DBSA, and that's corporate giving, and the two ways that you can get funding from corporations, which is through sponsorships and through grants. Next slide. Corporations, a sponsorship, a company donates money to support an event or a program is known as a corporate sponsor. Through sponsorship, corporations can help nonprofit organizations raise money for events, programs, and achieve other goals. There are several different types of sponsorships, but the two most common are financial, obviously money, the one that everyone's chomping at the bit for, but there's also in-kind donations, as Jessica referenced before. In-kind donation could be anything from a product for a goodie bag, it could be a meeting space, or it could be someone who's a subject matter expert sharing their expertise as a speaker or conducting some kind of workshop or seminar, similar to what we're doing here today. Next slide. Some of the criteria for corporate sponsorship is what we're going to talk about next. Choosing to apply for corporate sponsorship is more than just requesting money to support your cause. It's a two-way business relationship with both sides looking to get a return or investment or ROI. When you're thinking about corporate sponsorship, first of all, you want to think about bandwidth. Unlike the other two examples of revenue generation that Jessica talked about, corporate sponsorship as well as grant making really requires a lot of time and energy, and to get all these things correct and to follow all through on all the fundraising cycle priorities. But first and foremost, when you're looking at corporate sponsorship, you want to look at whether or not look at the corporate sponsorship to look and see if the partner aligns with your organization's mission. A mission defines the organization purpose and goals. As you know, DBSA's mission is to provide hope, help, and support and education to improve the lives of those who live with mood disorders. So, but whatever side of the relationship you're on, whether you are the grantee or the grantor, you want to find a partner that whose reach and reputation has the ability to advance your cause or promote your values. There are a lot of benefits to corporate sponsorship. Again, this is a two-way relationship, so the return on investment works on both sides in slightly different ways. So for nonprofit, for-profit businesses such as corporations, pharmaceutical partners, etc., you would like to, they often participate in sponsorship to demonstrate their commitment to social responsibility to the individuals they serve in the community or in the regions that they're located, and for marketing purposes to get their name out there. As a result, corporations want to make sure the partnership is positive and have measurable results in those areas. Benefits of corporate sponsorship include enhancing reputation, raising brand awareness, and increasing the reach of the audience. And again, this is a two-way street, so to speak, because both sides are looking for all those three things, but from slightly different vantage points. Next slide. I'm going to quickly go over and talk about some steps for writing a corporate sponsorship request letter. But there are 5 basic steps we're going to go over, but before you even start writing your sponsorship, you're going to want to start by researching the organization or the company you're seeking to reach out to. Once you've done your research, you want to take time to hone your message. And some of the things you want to consider in honing your message is, why did you choose this corporation? Was it because of the mission, their connections, their giving history, or something else? You also want to think about what personal connections you can leverage, such as if you know a member of their board or a staff member, or maybe this is a organization that you have participated in or engaged with before. So those are some of the things you want to think about. You also want to know, very important, as Jessica mentioned earlier, about knowing a person's name, but you want to know the person that you're reaching out for the sponsorship. Today, most sponsorships are done electronically, but it does help, and oftentimes even on electronic sponsorships, they will ask you if you know someone that works with that company or organization. So it's good to know who you're reaching out to, because if you don't know who that person is, your request might not receive the same attention. So the 5 steps you want to talk about in terms of writing your sponsorship letter is 1, preparing to write your letter through research and considering your message and audience. 3, that's 1 and 2. 3, you want to offer contact for your fundraising. In other words, create a case, a need for fundraising. You want to state what the need is and how your proposed ideal or event is going to offer a solution to that problem. And then last but not least, you want to close out your letter and send it. Now, while some corporations will ask you to mail the letter through snail mail, that's usually not the case. You're usually attaching your letter to an online application. Next slide, please. So next we're going to talk about nonprofit grants. Grants are similar to sponsorships, and they serve as a financial or donation to an organization based on criteria determined by the funder. Grants are typically given by a foundation, a corporation, or a government agency. As I mentioned, the intent of a grant request is similar to a sponsorship, but it's really more labor intensive and requires a lot more different information and also deliverables in order to successfully complete an application. So what are some of the things you want to consider for a grants? Oh, before we jump into that, I want to talk about a little bit why nonprofits benefit from grants. A grant is, unlike a loan, something that you don't have to pay back. That's a big bonus. And a lot of people may know about the PPP loans that happened during the pandemic. For those who were qualified and met the terms of the loans, those loans were forgiven and turned into grants. So they did not have to pay back, but it does require reporting and making sure you make good on the deliverables that you promise ahead of time. Grants also build your nonprofit visibility. Once you receive one grant, you have a chance to demonstrate to a sponsor. Sorry, I got sirens going behind me. You get the chance to demonstrate to a sponsor that you are credible, that you are able to deliver, and nothing creates more success like success. Next slide. So what do you want to think about or consider before you write a grant? You really want to think about, again, your audience. You want to know you want to know, first and foremost, what institution is offering grants, consider the goals and the values and objectives. You want to understand the elements that you want to know that understanding these elements will later help you demonstrate how and why your organization is good fit for funding. You want to think about the minimum requirements. At the beginning, I said that when you go into corporate grant writing or sponsorship writing, you want to think about your bandwidth and if your organization has the ability to meet the capacity. So you do this by researching the eligibility requirements to make sure you meet the minimum requirements. If you do not meet the minimum requirements, you might want to contact, or it doesn't sound like it from the description they're providing, you might want to contact the grantor directly to discuss your options. Again, another thing to think about is ways to demonstrate your organization credibility. This can be through testimonials. It also can be letters of support from your local public officials or organizations and businesses in your community. You also want to provide data, success stories, and anything else that this grantor may ask for. Every grantor is different, but in the end of the day, they all want to know that their money is going to be used wisely and for the intended purposes. Next slide. So some elements to writing a grant. Again, each grantor has different criteria, but these are some of the common things you'll see asked for a grant proposal. The first is a cover letter or request letter. Some organizations will actually do that, some will not. But this should be a very short one-page letter that, or 2 pages at the most, that establishes why you're seeking the available grant, describing your organization and the project that you want to deliver on. And also this letter provides you a chance to show your professionalism, that you're not just willy-nilly asking or something, that you know the proper protocol and procedure. The next thing you want to look at is the executive summary. This can also be an abstract or overview. The executive summary basically summarizes the key points of your entire proposal. The section should be concise, but fully describe your goals, what steps you would take, why you need funding, and how you propose to measure success. It's often best to practice writing out this section, because this is going to be you're going to dig into the weeds, so to speak, a little bit more in the other sections of your grant, such as your need assessment. Again, this is the need. Why the need assessment is also known as need statement or problem statement. It defines the lack of resources, information, or opportunities, and the question or the problem that you're trying to solve. In this section, you're going to want to include as much data as possible and research to show how your organization is linked to being the link between the problem and the solution. Next slide. You also want to have your project description, also known as the project narrative. This is a section that states how you address a problem described in the needs assessment. The description should include your goals, your projected timeline, as well as how you're going to measure success. Pretty much the same things that were indicated in your executive summary, but in more detail. And of course, the big fun thing, the budget. The funders have to know why you're asking for money, and not only why you're asking for money, they want to know how the money is going to spend, and illustrate how the labor, cost, materials, and equipment are needed to fulfill your mission or your project. Just a note for this. If you are writing a grant, you want to try to avoid putting in budget items that take up more than 50% of your a person's salary, because most grantors do not like to pay for someone's entire salary, because once that grant is up, then that person no longer has a job, and no one wants to be that person that is responsible for someone losing their job. So I think a good measure in terms of how much you want to add for staff time, it is usually about 10 to 15%, but it varies from funder to funder. You also want to provide any supplemental documentation that the grantor has asked for. This could be an event agenda or program. It could be charts or other research that supports your claims that you didn't have time for in your grant. Another tricky thing about grants is, which is why I don't try not to spend a lot of time on grants, because they're a lot more complicated for one big reason they ask for things like word counts and letter counts, meaning you can only have so much space to complete the information that's being asked, and that can be tricky. So by adding the supplemental information, you have an opportunity to expand upon ideals that you had previously in your grant. I know that was a lot, and I was trying to go it pretty fast. I don't see any questions, so I think we're gonna go over to the Slido and ask you some questions.
Yeah, so our next question on the Slido is that we just talked about. It was a lot of information, a lot thrown at you. But is there anything that you'd be interested in trying? Yeah, and if you want to, if you somehow got exited out, you can go to the QR code that's on the screen or go back to slido.com and type in fundraising.
I'm impressed at how many people want to write a grant or a sponsorship letter. That is a big endeavor, but definitely one you should consider, especially if you like to write.
Oh, that's a good question. How does one find available grants to write for? We get a few newsletters that talk about all of the grant opportunities. How else would you say, Kimberly?
There are different fundraising. I can't think of the one that's escaping me right now, but there are some organizations that focus in on grants in your area, and I can't, for some reason it's escaping me. Maybe it's the end of the day. But there's one in mind that's in the Chicago area, but most national, most states have their own place where they publish information about grants, and some of those places have libraries that will help you do your research, so you don't have to do all this research by yourself, and they will point you in the right direction based on where you're located, what your area of focus, priority is, etc.
Mm-hmm. And I think that also, if you going back to like the connections too, if you have a connection at a certain, because a lot of corporations will also have foundations attached to them that are targeting to specific things. So if you think that you have a connection at a certain corporation, you can look at what they're like to invest in and kind of apply there as well.
The websites, their company website is a good place to start, because most reputable organizations have do social give and charitable giving, and they have guidelines there that tell you what the timeline is, what the requirements are, etc. Also, you want to look at cultivating relationships with those corporations that have invitation only requests. That's when you really have to put in a little elbow grease, and it's really about who you know to get in the door to get that invitation.
I don't know, Kimberly, were you thinking about the Forefront Library?
Thank you. Like, it was right there and I could not think
problem.
of it. Yes, that's exactly what I was about. Forefront is an organization, a nonprofit here in Chicago, where not only can you network with other grantors, but and nonprofit partners, but they also have an extensive library and very helpful staff that will help you find grants in your area. You still have to do some research from the information they give you, because oftentimes they're using directories that are often outdated almost as soon as they come out, but they are still a credible source to get started. Thanks, Vera.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll head over to the next question. What did you find most valuable about this presentation? Great. And I think I just sent the forefront link. Kimberly want to double check that was the right link.
It is.
It is.
Thanks, Jessica.
Yeah, the fundraising cycle is a great tool to think about. Amy in the chat said learning the different modes of fundraising, individual, sponsorship, and grant, all really different strategies to tap into.
And just to piggyback on that, diversification of your funding streams is the key, because you never know, based on inflation, recessions, et cetera, where your funding might change, even if you've been getting money traditionally, maybe for individuals or a particular corporation and grants. You had the things that are going on in the news, those when you hear about those financial reports that oftentimes we turn away from or start turning the channels from, it's important to diversify so you can keep your funding going and not rely on one source.
Yeah. Okay, so I think Vera will bring us home.
I sure will. Well, one, I want to thank everyone for really being transparent and answering those questions via Slido. It helps us as we will future presentations, but it also is an opportunity for us to answer your questions. So hopefully we've given you a couple of tidbits to think about. We know that, we've provided a lot of information for you to consider, and it's still okay that you may have some questions later on. Still feel free. Where most of us are on the website, you just have a specific question that you just you didn't think of. That's no problem. But what we want to do now is that we want to remind you that at the end of the summit, when you do receive the presentation and the tape recording that is happening right now, that is really almost finished, that you take some time to go back through the presentation at your own pace. We often forget some things, and so it'll be a great refresher for you, and also listening to the recording will also be very helpful. But there's a couple things that I want to remind you of, and also make a recommendation, and that is that after you have done that, I want you to really determine what is like 1 or 2 strategies that you might try. And some of you might say, I'm going to do 3 or 4. It's all up to you in terms of what you want to do, but I will say 2 things for you based on that. Make sure that you can manage it, and also make sure that you have the capacity to execute it well. So that can determine what you want to try, and how many of these strategies you want to try at one time. It's okay to take a phased approach based on all the different options that we provided you. But with that said, we hope that you have found today's presentation to be helpful, and it's provided you with information that you need to create your own successful fundraising plan. So with that said, we thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.